My wealthy family disowned me when I married my wife, but now her business is thriving. A year later, they're asking us for advice because their own business is failing. So, here I am, a 34-year-old man from a well-established business family. Our company, founded by my great-grandparents, has provided generously for subsequent generations, including mine. It's safe to say that we've enjoyed considerable comfort and hold a reputable position in the market. The business is currently managed by my father and uncle. Our family dynamics have always been somewhat reserved. Growing up, I witnessed my parents and their strict adherence to my grandparents' directives, a practice I unconsciously emulated. Communication at home was limited to basic pleasantries and discussions about my academic performance. Despite never experiencing financial hardship, I didn't have many enduring friendships. However, this solitude suited me as I dedicated myself to my studies and earned a place at a prestigious business school, preparing to eventually take over the family business. It was there that I met Evie, a vibrant 32-year-old who was involved in every school event and always took the lead. She noticed my reserved nature in class and made it her mission to bring me out of my shell. Evie became my closest confidant during our university years, profoundly impacting my personal development. By the time I graduated, I was transformed and I knew she was the one for me. When I expressed my feelings, Evie reciprocated, and our romantic relationship began. I introduced her to my family, who initially seemed to approve of her. However, their true feelings surfaced after she left. They criticized her for not belonging to a prominent business family and deemed her unsuitable for us. Their words fueled a growing resentment within me, but I chose to concentrate on what mattered most. Determined, I took Evie on her favorite hiking trail the following day and proposed. Caught off guard, but moved by my certainty, she accepted. Evie's presence in my life unveiled the superficiality of my family's values, affirming my indifference towards their opinion. I sent a text to our family group announcing the engagement. The response was muted, typical for our family dynamics, but thankfully no negative comments were made, which I took as a positive sign. Evie, meanwhile, was forging her path as an entrepreneur with a startup idea as novel and uncertain as Scrub Daddy before its breakthrough on Shark Tank. She had poured her passion into this venture, funding it with savings from working 2 jobs during our college years. Though I offered financial support, she declined, asserting that this was her project and my role was simply to provide moral support. On the other hand, my family was incessantly preoccupied with the wedding plans, eager to turn it into a grand spectacle for their elite social circle. They initially assumed that Evie's parents were of a significant social standing, given her education at a prestigious business school like mine. However, upon discovering that she was adopted from a modest background, their enthusiasm waned and they suggested I persuade her to downplay her family background at the extravagant reception they now wanted in place of a traditional wedding. At this point, I was increasingly reluctant to involve my family in the wedding. Evie, having been raised by wonderful adoptive parents, held deep familial values. I couldn't bear to tell her the truth about my family's wishes, so I opted for a white lie instead. I expressed a desire to elope, framing it as a long-held dream of mine allegedly supported by my family. Evie naturally inquired about including our friends and family. I reassured her that eloping was truly a dream of mine and that it had my family's blessing. Convinced, she excitedly called her parents, who were surprisingly supportive of the plan. Thus, the following weekend, we headed to a city famous for its elopement packages and got married there in a small, intimate ceremony. After we were officially married, I called my mother to break the news. The information spread rapidly, igniting a frenzy within the family. Although none of them were pleased with my unilateral decision, they maintained a facade of approval for the sake of their social standing. Following our honeymoon, Evie spent a few days with her parents while I returned to my family's home. The physical distance gave us both some perspective on how to manage our new familial relationships moving forward. As expected, my family gave me an earful for marrying without their permission or presence. Normally reserved, I found my voice this time and stood up for Evie, confronting them about their earlier disparaging comment. My assertiveness and their hypocrisy left them momentarily speechless, a stark deviation from my usual demeanor. The topic of the wedding was quickly dropped and the family shifted their focus to organizing a grand Christmas celebration, positioning it as a substitute for the missed wedding festivities. Though I was reluctant to participate in what felt like a superficial event, I agreed, considering it could offer valuable networking opportunities for Evie's burgeoning business. The planning committee included my mother, aunt, uncle's wife, and their son Frank, a 25-year-old man. With the event scheduled in a month, I realized it was crucial to discuss my family's true sentiments with Evie, preparing her for any potential undercurrents at the party. Contrary to my fears of her reaction, Evie revealed she had sensed their disapproval from our first meeting and was bracing for our eventual breakup. However, my proposal had deepened her trust in our relationship, and she reassured me of her readiness to face any challenges ahead. Time flew by, and soon the Christmas celebration was upon us. We were greeted by Frank upon our arrival. Initially, we met with my parents, grandparents, and other family members. Their reception was notably frosty. My father didn't even embrace me while offering his congratulations. Evie caught my gaze, offering a reassuring look that we would handle whatever came our way. The event itself was a mixed bag. While Evie managed to draw some attention to her business, the overall atmosphere was strained and several things did not go as planned. After the guests departed, leaving only family, I noticed we had barely interacted with anyone besides Frank throughout the evening. Traditionally, this was also the night discussions about the future of the family business took place, and I anticipated potentially securing a role within the company. When I approached my mom to discuss the business, she asked me and Evie to sit on the sofa and wait for everyone to gather. The atmosphere grew tense when my father arrived and announced that my uncle would temporarily take over the company. He explained that my uncle had new and better ideas for expanding the business, whereas I had been too distracted by my marriage. I felt this was unfair. I tried to argue that I had always been dedicated and had been preparing for this role for the last 2 years. However, my dad countered that my decision to marry Evie, without considering the family's reputation and linking our name with her struggling business, showed my lack of seriousness. The situation escalated quickly. Although I was upset by their criticism of Evie, I was more troubled by the thought of being excluded from the family business I had grown up aiming to lead. Unable to process everything, I stepped outside for fresh air, and my mother followed me. Meanwhile, Evie confronted my dad, questioning if this was how they treated family. My dad laughed and dismissively told her that she and her husband could be part of the family when they matched their standards. Overwhelmed and without a comeback, Evie stormed out, taking me back home with her. The next day, once I had calmed down, I called my dad to speak privately. I wanted to tell him that it was unacceptable to speak to my wife in such a manner. He refused, claiming what needed to be said had already been said the day before. I tried reaching out to other family members, but only my mom responded, pleading with me not to stir further trouble. After talking with Evie, who was deeply hurt by my family's comments, we decided to let it go and chose peace over conflict. I was distraught for days over the loss of what I had worked towards all my life. During this tough time, Evie offered me a high-profile position at her company. Accepting her offer, I decided it was time to move forward. Over the next few months following our disagreement, my mother occasionally called to check on us, but eventually these interactions ceased and we lost contact with my family for almost a year. Initially, my absence from the family business raised eyebrows among acquaintances, but since there was no public disownment, rumors gradually subsided. During that year, I supported Evie in expanding her network, which significantly boosted her business. It wasn't long before her venture began to thrive, growing rapidly with the help of key market connections. Her success led to her recognition as one of the rising entrepreneurs by a prominent magazine. Financially, we were now doing very well with substantial profits rolling in. With the business on a solid footing, Evie and I decided to take a break and enjoy a digital detox vacation in the mountains, giving ourselves a chance to unwind. Upon our return, we found our devices inundated with calls and messages. Among these, Evie noticed several missed calls, voicemails, and an email from my mother. Curious and a bit apprehensive about the sudden contact, Evie opened the email first. It contained a heartfelt message from my mom expressing her desire to reconnect and inviting Evie for a lunch to catch up. Thrown off by this gesture after a year of silence, Evie called my mother to find out her intentions. My mom admitted that their previous actions were a mistake and expressed a desire to make amends. She specifically asked Evie to meet her alone before discussing anything with me, suggesting a possibility of reconciliation. Evie speculated that my parents might be ready to offer me the leadership position in the family business, a role I had once coveted deeply, so she agreed to the meeting. When they met, my mom treated Evie with unexpected respect, a stark contrast to their last encounter. She inquired about my well-being and warmly congratulated Evie on her business achievements, signaling a potential shift in our strained family dynamic. Evie politely inquired about the reason for the meeting. My mother revealed that my dad and uncle were eager for her insights on their business strategies Impressed by her success, surprised to learn they were interested in using her expertise, Evie maintained her composure, asserting that she would not engage with my family without my involvement. She promised to consider their request and excused herself from the meeting. That evening, Evie and I had a significant disagreement. She had met with my family without telling me, the same people who had once demeaned us. I expressed how I valued her dignity above all, making it clear that reconnecting with my family was out of the question after their dismissive behavior. Despite the tension, Evie agreed to send a message to my mother stating our decision to sever ties. In a moment of frustration, however, I proposed a different approach. I suggested we meet with my family, but only if it was on our terms, with everyone present. Reluctantly, Evie agreed to this plan and sent the message. We visited my family's home the following weekend, where we were unexpectedly welcomed with open arms. My father praised me excessively, attributing his newfound appreciation to Evie's integration into our family. During the visit, I confronted him about their sudden change of heart, especially since they had shunned us for not meeting their financial expectations. My father confessed that the business was struggling after unsuccessful new ventures led by my uncle, and he wanted me to lead the recovery with Evie's help. I barely contained my disbelief, questioning why he believed we would assist after their previous treatment of us. Caught off guard, he struggled to justify his request, merely stating that we were still family. I reminded him of their past disdain and walked out with Evie, rejecting his plea for assistance. Following this, I asked Evie to block my mother's number, which she did. However, my family continued to bombard my phone with messages accusing me of mocking their financial woes. Evie suggested that a simple refusal might have been sufficient, and reflecting on it now, I admit that perhaps my response was excessively harsh. First, a heartfelt thanks to everyone who supported me in the comments and to those who criticized my actions in the last incident. I acknowledge that I was wrong for deliberately humiliating my family, driven by the hurt they caused Evie and me. Despite the tempting opportunity for revenge, I now see that my actions were excessive. Although I regret my behavior, I am not inclined to apologize, as some have suggested, which I find unreasonable. Since my last update, there has been a significant development. My father fell ill, which my family attributed to my harsh words. However, it turned out to be just the flu he caught on a business trip to a colder state the previous week. I've been ignoring my mother's calls, but can't help listening to her voicemails where she insists they never intended to ostracize us and always cared for us, even during our year of no contact. Part of me wants to remind her of her absence of care during that year, but I'm trying to steer clear of petty arguments now. Evie has been feeling stressed about the entire situation, blaming herself for the rift between my family and me. I reassure her daily that their cold and heartless behavior is not her fault, and I affirm my choice to choose her over anyone else any day. As the weeks passed, the barrage of calls and texts from my family didn't subside, with even my grandparents imploring me to return home and resolve the issues once and for all. It's ironic that none of them have made the effort to visit us, despite knowing where we live. In an attempt to manage the situation, I reached out to Frank, the only family member who seemed rational. He apologized for what I had endured and promised to try and stop the family from bothering me further. Unexpectedly, he also mentioned that my father had been considering permanently excluding me from the family and the company due to my so-called attitude problem. I was stunned by this revelation and immediately called Evie, who was at work. I shared with her my resolve not to return to my family's toxic environment, yet it still stung to hear about their plans to disown me. Evie advised me to stay calm and wait for her to return so we could discuss it further. So here I am, updating you all as I wait for Evie to come home. In the next update, I'll share more about our conversation and the decisions about my relationship with my family. I shared with Evie that while it might feel odd to disconnect from my family's antics, I was confident in our ability to thrive independently. Despite her willingness to assist them, I strongly advised against it, fearing they would exploit her generosity and leave her feeling used. She promised not to intervene, and we decided to leave it at that. Shortly thereafter, Evie received a missed call from Frank, which was unexpected, especially since she was unsure how he had gotten her number. She promptly informed me, and together we returned his call on speakerphone to ensure transparency. Frank didn't waste time, revealing that our family business was now discredited in the market due to financial mismanagement. He implored Evie to help restore their reputation by lending her financial support and associating her business with theirs. Evie firmly declined, reiterating her unwillingness to get involved after our last contentious meeting. Unexpectedly, Frank then handed the phone to my grandfather, who had been listening in on the call. Initially, he tried to persuade Evie gently, but his tone quickly turned coercive, threatening our exclusion from the business and inheritance unless we complied. Sensing Evie's distress, I intervened, dismissing my grandfather's threats and warning him against any further intimidation. His response shifted from aggressive to apologetic as he broke down and began to plead for forgiveness. I ended the call, making it clear that any further threats would result in legal consequences. To help Evie recover from the stressful interaction, I brought her some water and comforted her. This incident reaffirmed our decision to maintain no contact with my family, a stance we intend to keep moving forward. Although I doubt they will cease their attempts to reach out, we are prepared to stand our ground. In the next update, I'll share some positive developments, but I also need to address concerns raised about potential threats due to my grandfather's long-standing business connections. Despite these worries, the current dire state of their business affairs has virtually nullified any influence they once held. After receiving a suggestion to expose my grandfather's bullying tactics on social media, I considered it briefly. However, reflecting on my previous actions, I've chosen to not escalate situations unnecessarily. The family is already struggling, and I feel it's important to rise above and not intensify their hardships. It seems my firm warning to my grandfather had a lasting effect, as there has been silence from their end for several months now. In more joyful news, Evie is pregnant. We are both thrilled at the prospect of becoming parents. This new development has thankfully coincided with a period of peace, allowing Evie a stress-free pregnancy. We've kept the news private so far, so consider this post as our official announcement. Aside from our personal joy, our business is also thriving, adding to our good fortune. Interestingly, one of our investors, a businesswoman we met at the infamous Christmas party hosted by my family, has continued to support us. She has been like a guardian angel to Evie, and our relationship with her has grown strong. Recently, she requested a meeting with both of us on an urgent matter, which piqued our curiosity. During the meeting, she disclosed unsettling news about my family's business woes, explaining that their reputation had plummeted, making it difficult for them to maintain business relations. Moreover, she revealed that speculation about my involvement in Evie's company rather than the family business was causing murmurs in the community. Our investor also informed us that my family was attempting to leverage our relationship, falsely claiming Evie's investment in their venture to salvage their image. Evie was astounded by their brazenness in using her name, especially after they had been explicitly denied the right to do so several times. We assured our investor that there was no truth to their claims and expressed our gratitude for her vigilance in bringing this to our attention. She advised us to act swiftly to disassociate from my family's business to prevent any potential damage to our reputations. After careful consideration, Evie and I decided it would be best to publicly clarify that we had severed all ties with my family's business. Evie persuaded me to send a preemptive email to Frank, preparing them for the forthcoming public announcement. Though hesitant, I agreed to her request. In the email, I confronted Frank about their unauthorized use of our names and clarified that while we could have pursued legal actions, we would instead publicly declare our disassociation. This decision was made to spare both parties from further conflict during what should be a joyful time in our lives. Frank responded quickly to my email, admitting defeat and acknowledging that he was powerless to stop our parents from exploiting Evie's name. The following day, I took to social media with a decisive announcement on behalf of Evie and myself, declaring our complete disassociation from my family's business. We made it clear that anyone engaging with them under our names did so at their own risk. Anticipating a storm of reactions, we had already prepared our PR team and managers to handle inquiries with limited information, focusing solely on the business and not the family disputes. As expected, the post stirred considerable turmoil, attracting a barrage of questions and sparking rumors. In response, my dad and uncle tried to quell the uproar by falsely claiming that our social media accounts had been hacked and that the post was not from us. However, once we confirmed the authenticity of the message, the credibility of my family's business plummeted dramatically. It was unfortunate to see their decline, but their own actions had set this course. Amid the chaos, I encouraged Evie to take some time off. She agreed and went to stay with her parents, which I was thankful for as it shielded her from the brunt of the fallout. Meanwhile, my family, desperate and reeling from their losses, concocted a story. They accused me of embezzling funds to start Evie's business and claimed they had previously refrained from legal action out of familial consideration, now choosing to disinherit me. Their attempt to smear my reputation backfired when one of their own investors demanded proof. which they couldn't provide. After their unsuccessful attempt to discredit us through a Facebook post, things began to settle down. Evie, who had been completely off the radar, is about to return to work. It will certainly be interesting to catch her up on everything that transpired in her absence. I just hope this saga doesn't weigh too heavily on her as we look forward to a new beginning. In my latest update, a few months have passed since these events. Evie found humor in the absurdity of their accusations when I filled her in. Ironically, my mother learned of Evie's pregnancy through a mutual acquaintance and has attempted to reach us through our office contacts since she's blocked everywhere else. One evening, when all other attempts to reach us had failed, my mother appeared at our doorstep, inebriated and distressed. We couldn't turn her away in such a state, so we let her in. Once inside, she shared that following our public disengagement, their business had collapsed under the weight of its debts, forcing them to shut down significant parts of it. This financial strain had driven a wedge between my dad and uncle, leading them to live separately, with my grandparents retreating to their country residence. Throughout her visit, my mother pleaded for a chance to be involved in her future grandchild's life. She even claimed that my dad regretted how they had treated us and suggested she was prepared to leave him if it meant reconnecting with us. Given her condition, it was clear she wasn't in a state to make such decisions, so I reminded her of her previous support for the actions that damaged Evie's reputation. After she became agitated and caused a scene, we arranged for an Uber to take her to the address listed in her diary. We included a note firmly requesting no further contact. Shortly thereafter, Frank reached out via text, asking for employment at our company amid his own family troubles, expressing a desire to learn from Evie. Recognizing that Frank had always been reasonable, we invited him to submit his resume with the stipulation that this arrangement remained confidential from the rest of our family. He agreed to these terms. Meanwhile, Evie, now in her third trimester, is feeling the strain of work more acutely. To alleviate this and truly start anew, we've decided to relocate to a nearby city, allowing us to stay connected to our business while establishing a quieter life. We are preparing for the move, hopeful that this fresh start will bring us the peace and stability we need.